Titled, I Can't Unsee That. Anybody ever seen something that you just thought, man, I wish I could unsee that. I remember a story that my son Nick told about how he was new to Italy, and he and Taylor had moved into a home, and he had something, I can't remember just what it was, in the early morning hours that he needed to get outside really rapidly. Maybe it was the trash, I can't remember. But he was still in his PJs, but he needed a robe. He couldn't find his robe, and he thought, well, I'm just going to run out there real quick and run back, and so I'm just going to borrow Taylor's robe, which was, I may be butchering this, but it was something like this. It was like a pink robe with a gold bunny on the back, and as he went out there, raced out there, and then he turns around, and his little Italian neighbor, she's standing at the window looking at him. She had just opened the shutters for the day, and she's looking at this wild American with a pink robe and a bunny on it, and she just closed the shutters. I can't unsee that. It's a popular phrase in our culture right now, and it's kind of cute. It's what you say when someone says something gross or something disgusting or inappropriate in your presence, right? And you say, oh, I can't unsee that. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse number 7, we live by faith, not by sight. And actually, what's going on in this setting in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, some people spend their whole life searching for the meaning of life. Paul is giving us the meaning of life. In 2 Corinthians 5, he literally is, because he tells us that, you know what, one of these days these bodies are going to wear out. They all do. We're going to die. And did you know that it's better to be present with the Lord if you're absent from this body, that is, if you've died, then you're going to be present with the Lord. And this is even better than living. And he uses this as a really vital, important teaching. And he literally says, because death gets swallowed up by life. So if you're worried about death, hey, I know all of us, we probably think about it, like what's it like on the other side? What will it be like at that moment? We've never been dead. We've only been alive. You know, we're not experts on what's on the other side. But according to God's Word, life will swallow us up. And when that moment happens, we'll go, oh, ouch, that stung. Boop. Kind of like an annoying fly or a little bee. Get off of me, death. You don't bother me. Where is your sting? Paul says all of this. And that's the setting that this verse is in. So Paul is saying, hey, in light of that, we live by faith, not by sight. Or maybe you're more familiar with the King James Version, the wording of it. We walk by faith, not by sight. And really the implications of this verse, it's not just talking about the physical eyes seeing, although that's definitely part of it, but actually he's talking about the five senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. We don't walk according to sensory perception, but we walk by faith. And that's the way we live. So in one sense, your eyes are seeing something, but you need to unsee what your eyes are seeing, and you need to see in a new way. I can't unsee that. One of my favorite TV shows that was canceled probably a decade ago, the lovable, compulsive OCD detective Monk. Did you ever see him? I just loved Monk, and he would obsess about every little detail, and he needed companionship, and he was lonely, and Natalie said, "You really ought to get a dog," and he said, "Oh, I can't get a dog." Well, why not? They're so lovable, and they're so cute and fluffy, and they're man's best friend. And Monk says, "Yeah, they're all of that. I understand that, but you see, the problem is that dogs eat. And then after they eat," and this is the way he put it, "they uneat." So we need to unsee. And in the previous chapter to this one, it's 2 Corinthians 4:18, Paul says this, "So we fix our eyes on what is not seen." So we fix our eyes not on what is seen. Isn't that interesting wording? We fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal. I love Kay Burnett's devotional book, Voyage, Trusting Jesus in Uncharted Waters. And what she does, she talks about a ship that's taking a journey, and all along the way there's challenges and there's tests of various kinds, and how important it is to map out your journey and stick with your commitment to the plan that you have made. And so you don't worry about what you see off in the distance. There, you might see storms brewing, but really you're charting and you're following your track and your pattern and your path, and it might blow away by the time you get there. In other words, if we only went by what we see, then we would avoid a lot of the biggest challenges of life. But when we go through those challenges, that's where very often the greatest blessings come from. So I'm going to share with you 3 things this morning. Number 1, the concept. This is a concept that you've got to grasp. Here's the concept. You really can practice seeing in a different way. Some of us have been seeing in a particular certain way for so long that we just don't have the concept that there's a different way of seeing things. In other words, if you live in a material world and you only go by what you see and what you touch and what you feel, and you've always got, the whole world is just continually telling you, you deserve to feel good, you deserve to be good, you deserve to have things, and if you don't feel good and if you don't see good things, then you can start to believe that, well, this is a really bad world. But the concept is to begin to see in a different way. It is the curious concept of fixing your eyes, setting your eyes, adjusting your eyes, locking in on something that you can't see. You know, the eyes are all about sight. It's pretty much all they do. They've got one job, and that is to see. Eyes are not good at listening. Eyes make horrible conversationalists. Eyes have never smelled a steak on the grill. Eyes see. That's all they do. Sort of like the place kicker in football. He has one job. Kick the ball through the goalpost. He might stand on the sideline the entire 60 minutes of the game time, but it comes down to 3 seconds left in the game. He has one job. He doesn't have to block. He doesn't have to catch the ball. He doesn't have to throw it downfield. He doesn't even have to be part of strategy and game plan in that sense. But he's got one job: kick the ball through the goalpost. And do you know, NFL place kickers have lost their jobs for missing a kick at the end of a game. I know numbers of times where on Monday morning place kickers were fired because they didn't do their job. And do you know what they always say? You had one job. Just one job. Just kick the ball through the goalpost. The eyes have one job. They see. That's all. Now, the eyes have never tasted a grilled steak, but they sure make it taste better, don't they? The eyes have never smelled a pot of stew that's been cooking all day in the crock pot. But when you walk in the room and you see the steam rising and bubbling, you know, the eyes help out. Eyes have triggered all kinds of emotions. Eyes can't talk. They've just got one job, and that is to see. But eyes can shed a tear. And there is more said with one tear from the eye than 1,000,000 words from the mouth. One tear says more than 1,000,000 words. Now, so just for a moment, I want to conduct an experiment with you here in the room. I'd like all of you to participate. So Paul has said to us, fix your eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen. So for the next 10 seconds, I want you to just fix your eyes on something you can't see. Go ahead. How's that working out for you? Look at something you can't see. It's kind of like saying, don't think about a pink elephant. Or you can't think of anything else now. But it's really, he is using, Paul, these most vivid descriptors. Fix your eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Paul, help. I want to look at the unseen. I know that there's this thing called temporary versus eternal. I know that there are these values that should drive my life and should be the motivator for me, but everything around me screams to focus on what I see. And you're telling me to focus on what I can't see. I remember these very powerful words from Herman Hagedorn. A few years back, I used it in my private prayer time. Reuben P. Job and Norman Shawchuck, their devotional book. And just an incredible journey that God took me on that had been recommended to me by someone else, by my father-in-law. Recommended, hey, you might try this. I loved it. I ended up doing it again, repeating it with both of my sons, and with Paul. The four of us did that together throughout another year, several years later. But Herman Hagedorn wrote these words: keep open. Oh, keep open. My eyes, my mind, my heart. Keep open. So, in the first place, we talked about the concept, but here's the second point, the conditioning. You must set your heart in a good direction. Now, you must set your heart to be filled with faith, not to be filled with fear. And that really is about conditioning. Anything that you've ever done in your life that's worthwhile required conditioning on your part. Any discipline, any act, it took a certain amount of conditioning. If you learned a new language, then you conditioned yourself to learn verbs, to learn structure and syntax and how words fit together in that new language. If you learned a musical instrument, you learned it because you spent time with it. You conditioned yourself to play it, to learn it. Although there are freaks of nature out there. I served on staff one time with, he was a genius, Al Reaver. He pastors in Jackson, Mississippi still today. This is Dave Reaver's brother. You may know Dave, worldwide evangelist. But Al was just a brilliant mind. He graduated summa cum laude from Rice University, 4.0 in Romantic languages. And he would teach concepts that were just so, I would be blown away by them. But this literally is a true story. Al couldn't play the piano, but he understood mathematics. And he read a book about how Beethoven, even when he was going deaf, could play the piano because he had figured out the mathematical formulas in his mind. And Al read it and said, "Oh, that makes sense," and sat down and began playing the piano. Now, most of us are not that way. Most of us, we have to condition ourselves and practice and do scales and learn how chord structure happens. Anything that you've done good in life, you've disciplined yourself. If it was a trade or a work skill, you became familiar with how things worked and what tools to use and which ones worked best on the job, whether it was woodworking or plumbing or mechanicking or whatever it would be. It requires conditioning. Stephanie and I had a goal. Actually, it was my goal first, and then she joined me at the first of this year. We ran a 10K together. And she is better at conditioning than me. And I'm waiting on I ordered two braces that are supposed to help my knees, because I've got, it really bothered me. The run just really did my knees in. And so I've got these copper-infused braces that are supposed to help, and I'm anxious to give it a shot. But last weekend, she tells me, "Hey, I ran a 10K today." I'm like, "What?" "Yeah, I ran a 10K. And I said, "Well, what are you talking about? You didn't even tell me you were entering." And she said, "Well, they have these online. They now have these 10Ks where you can do a virtual 10K. And you just track in and you show where you ran, and then you turn your information in." And so she said, "The reason I did it is so cool. I got a medal, and I got, the bib comes with a number that you have on it." She said, "I got to choose my own number for the bib." And the number she chose was 311604. That's our son's ADC number. And it's very special, and it's very meaningful. So, but conditioning. There is a Bible text that teaches about conditioning. The Apostle Paul, same writer, we just read a verse from him in Corinthians, 2 verses. Same writer, a different letter, different situation, different church. He's actually, he wrote to the church in Corinth, and that's what we just read. But now this is a more general letter, really a lot of theological training and beliefs and doctrines in the book of Romans, and it's chapter 8. And he talks about the importance of conditioning. Just pay attention to what he says. Those who live according to the flesh have their minds set on what the flesh desires. But those who live in accordance with the Spirit have their mind set on what the Spirit desires. The mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's law, nor can it do so. Those who are in the realm of the flesh cannot please God. 3 different times in a short amount of verses, he says you have to set your heart, set your mind. If you're struggling with areas of the flesh taking control, lust of the flesh, for instance, it's because, I'm going to tell you what's happening. You're feeding the flesh, and the flesh is winning. If you feed the Spirit will win. And it is a daily thing. It doesn't go away. You can be saved for 43 years and be a pastor for 32 years. But every single day, you have to decide, at least I know where to start. The world's crazy, but at least I know if I start by reading God's Word and praying and waiting upon Him, if that's where I begin, then I'm conditioning myself to go after the things of the Spirit. But guess what? It's just like 2 dogs in a fight. Whichever one you feed is going to win. And if you feed your flesh, then your flesh will win. Why am I thinking horrible thoughts all the time? Why am I bombarded with all of these things? And this temptation is just so strong. And woe is me because I can't resist. I'm just so weak. It's because you're feeding the flesh. Feed the Spirit and you will win. So that's the condition. Now number 3 is the conviction. You must become convinced of a thing. Yeah, there's this concept, okay, I really can see in a different way. And there's this conditioning, you have to do the things that you know you need to do. But then this conviction, it doesn't do anything if in your heart you are not convinced of a thing. If you become convinced in your heart that something is good, something is pure and honorable and praiseworthy, then you will go after that thing with all of your heart. But that conviction needs to reside inside of each one of us. Now, there's some words that the writer of Hebrews says about Moses. And he's not only talking about Moses, he's talking about a lot of other people of faith. In fact, if you know anything about the Bible at all, you probably have heard Hebrews chapter 11 chronicles all of the warriors of faith. It's sometimes called the faith chapter. And it names all of these people who were great at practicing faith. Moses is one of them. Hebrews 11:1, it starts off this way. Now faith is being sure of what we hope for. Being convinced. Do you see the conviction? Being convinced of what we do not see. Some people will say to you, well, you're crazy. I don't see any proof that Jesus ever died on the cross and rose from the dead. I don't see anything but just a book that was written by men. And I don't see anything but organized religion. And it's not, there's nothing valid about it. No. If you wanted to get really careful and studious about the Bible, and you go back and see how it came into being and the protection and preservation of God's church all through the centuries, you can find all of that stuff if you're looking for it. The Bible is more validated than any other book in the history of the world. But here's the thing. At some point, it's not about what you can or cannot prove. The Bible does not set out to say, I'm going to prove to you anything. It just simply says, in the beginning, God. Either you accept it or you don't. But I'll tell you this, if you can accept, in the beginning, God, then you can accept everything that follows. If you cannot accept it, then you're going to struggle. But in the beginning, God. And this is the conviction. It comes upon us. So faith is being sure of what we hope for and being convinced of what we do not see. Now notice what Hebrews says about Moses. Verse 23 down to 27. By faith, when Moses was born, his parents hid him for 3 months. because they saw the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Just pause momentarily. You remember that when Moses was born, they were throwing new baby boys into the river to get rid of the Jewish boys. That's what was happening. But his parents disregarded the king's edict, and they protected Moses. Verse 24, by faith, when he grew up, Moses refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be ill-treated with the people of God than to enjoy sin's fleeting pleasure. He regarded abuse suffered for Christ to be greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt. For his eyes, get this, his eyes were fixed on the reward. Apparently Moses was looking at something that no one else could see. He was seeing the unseen. He wasn't looking around saying, boy, if I just stay in line here in Egypt, I'm already the number 2 son. I'm one of Egypt's favorite sons. I'm right up there with Ramses. I've got my ticket. I've got it made. Got the nice palace. Who knows? Maybe they'll even erect an image of me someday. If I just stay on track and don't mess this up. This is a really good gig I got going. No. He doesn't do that. But Moses, rather, he fixed his eyes on an eternal reward. Verse 27 ends it by saying, by faith he left Egypt without fearing the king's anger, for he persevered as though he could see the one who is invisible. Moses figured it out. Moses has 20/20 vision. Moses has X-ray glasses. He can see the unseen. Why? Because he's become convinced of this thing. And so, for you, I would say, master this concept, condition your heart, allow the conviction of the Holy Spirit to work inside of you. Here's the ending of the message today. Each week, I try to ask myself, what's really the main thing? Sometimes I call it the takeaway. And by the way, Oliver Senna preached an incredible sermon last Sunday, and you notice he brought us, thank you for that, he brought us to this, here's what I want you to take away. And here's what I want you to take away this morning. Visualize this. Your focalization determines your destination. What you focus on is where you're going to end up. Focus upon what others are not seeing. See the unseen. View the invisible. Have faith in God. Mentioned Kay Burnett earlier. She tells a story in her book about the difference between true north and magnetic north. Probably some of you in this room are way more familiar with that than I am. But the concept is that if you wanted to go to Antarctica, if you wanted to find, let's say you wanted to find the North Pole, and so you decide, well, I'm going to go there. I'm going to find it. Well, you can't take a flight there. They don't have airplanes there. So you get out your trusty compass, and you're going to try to find the North Pole. But because of the way latitude and longitude works and the curvature of the earth, your compass is not going to lead you there. Because of magnetic north is a different reading than true north. And she tells the story of one who tried to do just that very thing, but ended up 280 meters off. Literally almost a quarter of a mile off from the target. How does that happen? It's because when you start out using your compass, the difference is so minuscule that you wouldn't even notice it. But if you're not fixed upon the correct destination, then as you're journeying slowly, you begin to diverge from the true path and move off target. And so I'm calling all of us here today. Our focus determines our destination. And I'm calling you today, hey, let's take scales off our eyes. Let's wash our eyes so that we begin to see in the Spirit again. Let it be simple again. Let it be just so easy to walk. It's all about walking with Jesus. Let's walk with Him. Let's be in fellowship with Him. Maybe we need to have our eyes washed just like the men in the pool of Siloam, to be able to be cleansed, to have a new, fresh vision. If it's a little muddy for you, perhaps as we're closing today, you could say, God, would you crystallize my target? What is, after all, what is my destination? Because I get so distracted by all the stuff. There's so many voices screaming and vying for my attention. But you've called me, and I've got this purpose that you're calling to me. Oh God, just wash my eyes so I can see again. Let it be simple. Let it be beautifully simple. I want to request of Pastor Mo if he could repeat, come to the altar. If the band, if you guys could do that, and even if the Lord just leads you in other directions. But we're going to receive communion this morning. This is a beautiful way to close out our time together. And the folks who have the communion cups, they've used hand sanitizer. They're putting on plastic gloves. And rather than you reaching in and grabbing it, they're going to just hand you a communion cup. We're trying to think of the way.
And I am in your presence. Reach out unto me. Reach out and I shall touch you. I shall heal you. I shall give unto you the desires of your hearts. Hear my words and reach out to one another. Help those who need the love of Christ. Help those who need the healing power. Lift them up in your prayers. Lift them up and give unto them the word of your Almighty Father, who has given all unto you for the asking. Behold, I am here, saith the Lord. I am here.
Hallelujah. Come on, church. Let's give the Lord praise.
But you don't understand how to get closer. You want to get closer. You want to sit at my feet. And the Lord would say, I'm making it personal. Make it personal. Sit on my lap. As long as you are looking for me, you will be closer to me. As long as you are listening to me, you will be closer to me. I am pulling you in. Even if you don't see it, I'm drawing you in. I'm drawing you closer. I'm not going to let you get farther away from me. Like a father, I'm picking you up and I'm going to place you on my lap, and we will sit and talk for hours. You want to be personal? I'll be personal with you. I will speak to you in the quiet moments where you feel alone, where you feel broken. I will meet you there. And I will speak with you, and I will talk with you, and I will hold you. How you long to sit in the presence of someone, anyone. You feel like there's no one to talk to, there's no one to speak with, but I'm here. I'm meeting you here. I'm meeting you in the moments, in the quiet moments in your life where you have no one to talk to. I am there. So there is someone to talk to. Feel that deeply in my spirit, that somebody needs to know you're not alone. He's holding you. He's lifting you up in His hands. Where you're broken, where you're falling apart, when you're thirsty and you need a drink from the well, He is holding out cups and buckets of water, and He's just dumping them over you. You don't have to be thirsty. He's here.
Come, Holy Spirit, sing that. Holy Spirit.